I'd like to start with a question. A simple question. What does your mother call you? Have you got it? Seeing the diversity of the crowd here today, I'm sure there were many different languages that each mother used. Personally, my mother calls me Bella, meaning beautiful in Italian. I'm sure it was hard for me to understand when I gained consciousness why I was Bella, my aunts were Zias, my uncles were Zios, grandma was Nonina, grandfather, Nono. And why, whenever I would speak with this Nono, it would always be about something simple, like the weather, or the current status of my local town playground being built. He does try his best, even if his English is limited. See, that's when I learned what immigration was. I learned that that was who I am. It finally clicked. I learned about the hardships that follow. I learned about how difficult it can be to accept it, but I also learned about the beautiful diversity that we bring to where we are from. Now, my heritage was never something that I struggled with. It was always there, and I was constantly getting more and more exposure through the connectedness of my family. My grandfather is very, very proud of his story of how he came to Canada. He came with only $100, a boat ticket, and a dream. Funny how every time he tells this story, the amount of money that he came to Canada with decreases. I'm pretty sure that my youngest cousin thinks he essentially swam himself to Canada. Joking aside, understanding your heritage is so vital for myself and other children of immigrant families. It widens your perspective and outlook on life. Even though this may sound falsified, coming from someone who doesn't even speak the language of their heritage. For me, understanding my heritage and knowing about your culture is vital in knowing about who you are as a person. It gives you a better sense of your identity. So when I think about identity, I would say it's described more as an influenced perception of self. So that means it can be influenced by your upbringing or your surroundings. Like, I knew what I was, right? I knew my name was Victoria. I knew I was Canadian. I knew about my Italian heritage, but I didn't really know who I was. So I used this personal identity to describe it. Now, heritage, although they are commonly used interchangeably, is something different. Heritage it can be described almost as a familial tradition passed down through generations. So in this way, it comes down to the question of more what versus who I am, right? So when thinking about identity, it comes down to this question again. What versus who you are, right? What is more of a question of your heritage, whereas who is more of a question of who you are and your influenced perception of self. Juggling this and understanding the small discrepancies between your heritage and your identity can be hard to overcome. It's hard to understand for any of us, but it is something that all of us as humans have to understand. When I think about myself, I think about when I first moved to Germany. So, a long time ago now. When I first moved here and I went for a walk in the forest with my mother, I remember thinking about the Canadian and English way of doing things when you would walk past another person and you would wave at them or say hello in passing, right? Now, you can imagine, if you're from here or you've lived here long enough, you know that people don't really say hello in passing. And this is not to be rude, but it's just simply not done. Although this is something small, becoming used to it and becoming understanding of this way of doing things was one of the reasons why I can describe myself as a third culture kid. A third culture kid is someone who identifies with not one, not two, but 3 cultures. I would say personally, I most identify with my Italian heritage as well as the German culture, since I've spent most of my teenage years here. So when it comes to this tertiary culture, it is something that is hard to juggle with, right? Juggling with this identity, with this new found perception of yourself, again, with this personal identity. It's something that's hard to understand, even for yourself. Even though it's something that's beautiful, something that brings a different level of diversity to where you're from, again, it can be hard. So, another thing that can be hard for us humans is to also understand how to juggle your heritage and your identity, right? Understanding how to find the balance between the two. While living abroad, I found that I brought it down to one word: connections. This can be connections between yourself and your family, connections to the food of your culture, connections to friends, and to the practices or traditions. These connections help make sure that you have that connection with your heritage without it being overexerting or too much to handle sometimes. Now, can I just quickly get a show of hands of who has lived in 2 countries? Wow. Okay, 3? 4? 5? Okay, 6? 6? Anyone? Okay, that's where I got you guys. Can I get someone to raise their hand again if you felt discriminated against simply because you didn't fit the mold of where you were living? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't really understand this for a long time until I could finally start to kind of understand the gist of it when I had lived in Germany for about 2 years at this point. And I went in the grocery store with a friend of mine, speaking English. I approached the counter, and the cashier spoke to me and said, in German, "We're in Germany, speak German." Now, at this point, my German was more than good enough to understand her, so it was a little embarrassing on her part. But past it being embarrassing and honestly fulfilling me a little bit, it was something that helped shed a light on how my mother and my grandmother felt while growing up in Canada as immigrants. It helped me understand it better. Growing up, my mom and my grandmother were discriminated against because they were immigrants, but this instance helped me kind of better understand what they were going through. This instance, not only that, but also just growing up abroad, helped shine a light on the utterly discriminatory and conformative ideologies that are still very prevalent in today's society. They not only influence our own perception of self, but also the perceptions that our children have. This is something that nobody at any age should have to experience. When I think about it, it makes me a little bit sad, but I know that if all of us in this room think within ourselves and think about those biases that we have and attack them, because those personal biases are not only hurting yourself, but they're hurting those around you. You're shielding yourself off from a beautifully diverse world that we have created, not only because of our diverse identities, but also because of immigration, partially. Now, who am I? Who are you? And who are we? I hope that through my TEDx talk today, I have been able to help you kind of attack those personal biases within yourself. Not only that, I hope that you've had a newfound perception of self through my talk today. I hope you were able to find a new answer to the question of not only what am I, but who am I? Now, I mean, all of us here, we're all here just trying to listen to my event. We're all from different places, different worlds, different cultures. We have different identities, but we're all here, sitting in the same room, listening to the same girl talk about the same topic. So even though we might look or sound different, how different are we really? Now, I must say, I am proud of my culture. And I hope that through this talk today, you have become more proud of your culture as well. Now, I want you to think about yourself for a second. Think about that again. Who am I? And what defines me? Is it able to be defined? Or is it simply undefinable? I've talked a lot about our similarities, but just as a final closing note, I want to pay homage to our differences, because the differences are truly what make us as a society shine. Now, I hope you, again, can leave this talk with newfound knowledge, not only of who we are, but also what we are and what we define. Thank you so much for listening.